The cemetery sprawled beneath a gray November sky, the kind of morning that swallowed sound. White funeral drapes billowed softly, catching the wind like the last breath of something dying. The grave was already open, a dark mouth, waiting. Inside it, fresh earth had been turned, dark and wet and ready. The casket sat above it. Mahogany, gold handles that caught the weak sunlight. Inside that casket lay Victoria Ashford, 53 years old, founder and CEO of Ashford Global Solutions. One of the most powerful women in Boston. Her face was pale, waxy, almost luminous against the white silk lining. Her eyes were closed, her hands folded across her chest like a prayer that had been answered. The crowd gathered in neat, grieving rows. 200 people, maybe more. Black suits, black dresses, black umbrellas held at precise angles. The wealthy grieved differently than others. Their sorrow was choreographed, measured, displayed like art at a gallery opening. Victoria's son, Marcus, stood rigidly beside the casket. 28 years old, sharp jawline, sharper eyes. He wore an expression of practiced devastation, the kind a man wears when he's inheriting a billion-dollar empire. Beside him, Dr. Richard Huang, the family physician, held a leather folder containing the death certificate. His signature was already on it. Cause of death: acute myocardial infarction. A heart attack. Sudden. Tragic. Final. The pastor stepped forward, his voice already rolling toward prayer when a sound cut through the cemetery like a blade. Stop. Everyone turned. The word came again, louder. Stop. Don't lower that casket. A man pushed through the crowd from the back. His uniform was wrinkled. A gray custodial shirt, with the cemetery's emblem on the pocket. His hands were calloused. His beard was overgrown, flecked with gray. His eyes burned with something that looked like madness or certainty. No one could tell which. His name was David Chen, 46 years old. He had been the groundskeeper at Ashford Cemetery for 3 years. No one knew his name. No one looked at him. He was the man who emptied the trash, who raked the leaves, who fixed the irrigation in the pre-dawn hours when the cemetery was a place of silence. "Who is that?" someone whispered. "Security," another voice said. 2 guards moved toward him, but David didn't stop walking. His breathing was heavy, intentional. He reached the platform where Victoria's casket rested, and stood there, his uniform dusty, his presence completely out of place among the Italian wool and diamond earrings. "My name is David Chen," he said, his voice steady but rough, like gravel being poured. "And that woman is not dead." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. Marcus's face hardened instantly. Cold. "Who the hell is this?" "Security! Remove him!" Dr. Huang said, but his voice cracked slightly. Just slightly. David pointed directly at Victoria. "She's not dead. She's been drugged. Something to slow her heart, cool her body, make her look dead. But she's alive. I heard you both discussing it." Silence. The kind of silence that presses against your chest. "That's absurd," Marcus said, stepping forward. "My mother is dead. She's been examined by our family physician. The death certificate has been filed. You're delusional." "I'm not delusional," David said, and his voice carried a weight that made even Marcus hesitate. "I was cleaning the east wing of your penthouse 3 nights ago. I heard you on the phone with Dr. Huang. You said, 'The compound will work perfectly. By the time anyone notices, she'll already be buried. The inheritance goes through tomorrow. No contest.'" Dr. Huang's face went white, completely white, like someone had drained all the blood from his body with a syringe. "That's a lie." "Oh no," Marcus snapped. but his hand instinctively went to his jacket pocket. "It's not a lie," David said. He looked directly at Dr. Huang. "You gave her the injection. You signed the death certificate knowing she was still alive. And you—" he turned back to Marcus. "You've been waiting for this moment your entire life. Your mother built that company. You were just waiting for her to die so you could take it and run it into the ground while you stuffed your pockets with billions." The crowd began to murmur. Phones lifted. Cameras started recording. "This is outrageous," Marcus said, his voice rising. "Get this lunatic away from my mother's funeral. Now." But David knelt beside the casket. He moved slowly, respectfully, as though approaching something sacred. His calloused hands, hands that had touched thousands of graves, thousands of stones marking the final resting places of the dead, gently lifted Victoria's head and tilted it slightly to the side. "Look," he whispered. "Look at her neck." Someone in the crowd gasped. There, on Victoria's neck, was a small puncture wound. Fresh, red at the edges. "That's from the injection," David said quietly. "Dr. Huang did that. 3 days ago." The crowd erupted. Whispers became shouts. The pastor dropped his Bible. An elderly woman clutched her pearls and wept. "This is fabrication," Dr. Huang said, but his hands were trembling. His fingers shook so badly he dropped the folder containing the death certificate. Papers scattered across the platform like white leaves. "Check her pulse," David said. He placed his own weathered fingers against Victoria's wrist, feeling for the thread of a heartbeat. "There. Do you feel that? That's not the pulse of a dead woman. That's the pulse of someone in a chemical sleep." An older woman stepped forward from the crowd. Victoria's sister, Eleanor. She had silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Let me," she said. She took Victoria's wrist, held it for a long moment, then looked up at David with tears streaming down her face. "He's right. She's warm. Her pulse is there. It's faint, but it's there." "That's medically impossible," Dr. Huang said. But his voice had lost all conviction. It was a whisper now, a confession disguised as denial. "The compound I used slows metabolic function by 90%, Doctor," Huang said suddenly, as if something inside him had broken. "Heart rate drops to 8 beats per minute. Body temperature falls. The eyes don't respond to light. To any trained professional, the subject appears deceased. Marcus promised me immunity. He said no one would ever know. He said—" "Enough!" Marcus roared. He lunged forward, his hand emerging from his jacket with a small syringe. "If she wakes up, the plan falls apart. I need her to stay asleep, permanently." The crowd screamed. 2 men in the audience grabbed Marcus and wrestled him to the ground. The syringe flew from his hand and shattered against the stone platform, clear liquid spilling across the marble. "Call an ambulance!" Eleanor shouted. "Someone call 911!" David was already moving. He reached into his own jacket pocket and pulled out a small brown bottle. Ancient-looking, the color of old medicine. "What is that?" someone asked. "An antidote," David said. He looked at Eleanor. "Help me. She needs to be positioned correctly." Her head back, her mouth slightly open. Eleanor moved without hesitation. Together, they tilted Victoria's head back. David opened the small bottle and dipped a dropper into the clear liquid inside. "Hold her mouth open," he said. Eleanor's trembling fingers gently parted Victoria's lips. The entire cemetery held its breath. The crowd had gone silent. 200 people, 200 cameras, 200 witnesses to something impossible. David's hand steadied. He had done this before. In his mind, 1,000 times. He squeezed the dropper. 1 drop, clear liquid. It fell onto Victoria's tongue. Nothing happened. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. Then, Victoria's body convulsed. Her chest rose sharply, as if she had been struck by lightning. Her eyes flew open, wild and confused. She gasped. The sound of that gasp, raw, desperate, the gasp of someone returning from the edge of death. It tore through the cemetery like thunder. "She's alive!" Eleanor screamed. "Oh God, she's alive! She's breathing!" Victoria's eyes rolled toward the face above hers, David's face. Weathered, scarred by years of grief, but filled with something like hope. "Who are you?" Victoria whispered, her voice hoarse, confused. "My name is David," he said. "You're safe now. You're alive." The sirens came then, distant and growing closer. Police cars. An ambulance. The world rushing in to collect the pieces of a crime that had almost been perfect. Marcus was handcuffed, screaming about his inheritance. Dr. Huang collapsed onto his knees, confessing everything through tears. The crowd erupted into chaos, cheers, prayers, people weeping openly. But David remained beside Victoria, his weathered hand still holding hers, his eyes never leaving her face. 3 weeks later, the hospital released Victoria. The antidote had worked completely. Her body had recovered within days. Her mind took longer, the trauma of knowing her own son had tried to murder her, that her trusted physician had betrayed his oath, that she had been moments away from being buried alive. But she recovered. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Marcus was convicted on charges of attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. Dr. Huang received 15 years for medical malpractice and conspiracy. The headlines screamed across every news outlet in America. "Son tries to bury billionaire mother alive." "Groundskeeper saves CEO's life." The casket that became a cradle. But the real story, the one that changed everything, unfolded quietly, away from the cameras. Victoria requested to meet David alone in her private study. It was an elegant room, all leather and mahogany, and walls lined with first editions. She sat across from him, studying him the way one studies a puzzle they're trying to solve. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "You risked everything. Your job, your reputation, everything." David was quiet for a long time. He looked at his hands, rough, scarred. The hands of someone who had worked in the dirt his entire life. "I have a daughter," he said finally. "Her name is Maya. She's 13. Beautiful. Smart. She has her mother's eyes." He paused, swallowed hard. 5 years ago, my wife died. Maya was 8. She didn't understand. She thought if she was good enough, smart enough, perfect enough, her mother would come back. I watched her break and never fully heal. Victoria leaned forward slightly. 3 months ago, I started dating someone new. Her name is Catherine. Maya didn't take it well. She was angry. She said I was replacing her mother. We had a terrible fight. She told me she hated me. She ran away. David's voice cracked. I found her 3 days later sleeping in the park. When I brought her home, she said something that broke me. She said, "Dad, you're invisible. No one sees you. Mom would have stayed if you were someone important, someone people cared about." And I realized my daughter didn't think I had value because the world had taught her that I didn't have value. He looked up at Victoria. "When I overheard you arguing with Dr. Huang, when I realized what was happening, I thought about Maya. I thought about her watching her mother disappear, and I couldn't let another child watch her parent vanish without fighting. I couldn't let another family break." Victoria's eyes were wet. "You saved my life," she said softly. "You gave me something in return," David replied. "You made me visible." You showed my daughter that even someone like me, a janitor, a groundskeeper, a nobody, could matter, could save someone, could be important. Victoria stood and walked to the window. The Boston skyline glittered in the distance. Billions of dollars of wealth and power spread across the landscape like jewels. "What if I told you," she said without turning around, "that I want you to work for me? Not as groundskeeper. As my personal security advisor? I'm rebuilding Ashford Global. I need people I can trust. People with wisdom. People who understand the value of a life." David's throat tightened. "I don't have the qualifications." "You have the only qualification that matters," Victoria said. She turned to face him. "You have a heart that won't break when tested. You proved that." 6 months later, David sat in a corner office on the 42nd floor of the Ashford building. The view was magnificent, the entire city spread below like a promise. His title was Vice President of Operations. His salary was substantial. His life had transformed completely. But the transformation that mattered most happened at home. Maya no longer flinched when he came home from work. She no longer whispered to her friends that her father was invisible. She wore a sweater to school with her father's company logo on it. She told people, "My dad works for the CEO of Ashford Global." One evening, David was working late at the office when his phone buzzed. A text from Maya. "Dad, I'm proud of you. Catherine made lasagna. Come home?" He stared at those words for a long moment. His eyes blurred. He packed his bag and left the office immediately. When he arrived home, the house smelled like tomato and basil and garlic. Catherine was in the kitchen, laughing about something. Maya ran to him and hugged him a real hug. Not the stiff, distant embrace of a hurt child, but the genuine embrace of a girl who finally saw her father as she should have all along. "You made it," Catherine said, smiling. "I wouldn't miss it," David said. They sat at the dinner table, the three of them. Outside, the city lights twinkled. Inside, there was warmth and laughter, and the kind of ordinary joy that most people take for granted, but that David had nearly lost forever. A year after the funeral, Victoria invited David to an event, a gala for the newly launched Ashford Foundation, dedicated to helping families in crisis. Families where one parent had been lost, where children had fractured under the weight of grief. David stood in a tailored suit, his first one ever, and looked at Victoria across the crowded room. She nodded at him with something like pride, something like recognition. Later that evening, as the gala wound down, Victoria approached him with a man at her side, tall, distinguished, a CEO in his own right, but with kind eyes. "David," Victoria said, "I'd like you to meet James Whitmore. He's the new chairman of the Ashford Foundation's board, and he's also, well, he's going to be my husband." David smiled genuinely and shook James's hand. "Victoria told me about you," James said. "What you did. What you risked." "I did what anyone would do," David said. "No," Victoria interrupted. "You did what only you could do. You saw someone being buried who was still alive, and you wouldn't let it happen. Not to me, and more importantly, not to another child. You saved more than my life that day, David. You saved my soul." David's eyes glistened, but he didn't cry. Instead, he thought of Maya at home, tucked safely in bed, knowing her father was a man of value, a man who mattered. 10 years later, David stood in the same cemetery where he had crashed Victoria's funeral. But this time, he wasn't there to stop a burial. He was there to witness a dedication. A statue had been erected, bronze, life-size, showing a man kneeling beside a casket with his hand outstretched. The inscription read, "In honor of David Chen, who saw a human being when the world had rendered her invisible, who risked everything to save a life, who showed us that courage is not the province of the powerful. It lives in the hearts of those willing to break the silence. From the grave, life rises. From the ashes, hope always returns. Maya, now 23, stood beside her father. She had graduated from college. She was kind. She was confident. She was alive in the fullest sense of the word. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she whispered. David took her hand and squeezed it gently. Victoria and James approached, walking slowly, their arms linked. Victoria was now 54, her hair streaked with silver, but her eyes were brighter than they had ever been. She had rebuilt her company into something greater. Not an empire of conquest, but a force for healing. "Hello, David," she said warmly. "Victoria," he replied. They didn't embrace. They didn't need to. The bond between them had moved beyond the physical. It existed in a place deeper than that. The place where one human being had saved another, where death had been cheated, where grace had prevailed. The sun began to set, painting the cemetery in shades of gold and amber. The sky burned softly, almost as if it was blushing at the beauty of redemption. David looked at his daughter, then at the statue that bore his name.